LOL take two. LOL take two. LOL take two. Now listen. People spend thousands of dollars taking classes and studying how to communicate with people effectively, develop rapport so you can connect with somebody, sell them something, or, let's face it, get laid. I can save you time and money and give you the secret right here, right now. Ask the person about themselves. That's it, because the truth is people love to talk about themselves. And after a half hour of the person answering your question about their life, they will come away thinking, wow, I really hit it off with that person. They really understood me. When in truth, all you really did was listen and nod in agreement while they went on and on and on. Now, many folks will take that cue, say their bit, and then throw it back to you in the form of a question about your life. It becomes a kind of badminton game, and it can be lovely, and you can end up selling them that thing or making a friend for life, or end up having a morning brunch after an evening of unbridled passion. Then there are the folks who take that question like it's a wide open door, and they rush through it down the rabbit hole. By then, you've heard the answer to your original question and moved on to other aspects of their lives you never would have asked them about to begin with. In these cases, you need to execute Plan B and pull the, excuse me, I have to, insert excuse here. I have to go to the bathroom. My phone is ringing and it's my boss's ringtone. Or, sorry, I have to go have a colonoscopy, root canal, anything to get away from you. Of course, the one question that inevitably sends the other person off into the wild blue yonder, never to return, is asking about that person's health. It is a minefield like no other and should be avoided at all costs. What starts as one ailment soon moves on to another one, and then another. Different ailment, different organ. In fact, after a while it becomes a virtual organ recital. I have some relatives whose organ recitals, once begun, are the equivalent of Gustavo Dudamel conducting Mahler's Third Symphony. And then sometimes you will get more than one person who will join in with their own organ recital. This then becomes a full-on symphonic concert of chronic complaining. In situations like these, it would be most helpful to have an organ recital bingo card. Let's see, tinnitus, irritable bowels, sciatica, arthritis, plantar fasciitis. Wait, bingo! What do I win? Now, of course, it's no fun having ailments or having things go wrong with your body, and often it's damn scary. And now we have the internet to look everything up and jump to every horrible conclusion that we're going to die from that splinter we got on our right middle finger while working in the garden. A couple of decades ago, HealthNet, my insurance at the time, sent me this big, thick medical book along with my insurance card one year. Now, this book had every disease and associated symptoms listed, and let's face it, was not the right thing to send to me. I remember going to see Dr. Schwartz many times, convinced I had diabetes, renal failure, or worse after looking up my symptoms in that book. Dr. Schwartz would sit and listen patiently and then calmly say, "Tony, you don't have diabetes or renal failure. Give me the book." No, Dr. Schwartz, I need it. Give me the book. I got rid of the book. And even now, when I go looking at symptoms on the internet, I'm stopped in my tracks by that voice of Wilbur Schwartz, MD. Tony, give me the book. Shortly after that time, somebody turned me on to a woman named Louise Hay. She had come to fame with this book called You Can Heal Your Life. Her theory was that most disease, or as she called it, dis-ease, was brought on by our own thoughts. And the way to really get past these physical issues was to deal with our mental side of the equation. At the end of the book, she had the list. It was a list of ailments and the probable mental causes behind them. I got this book and read it all with a grain of salt. I was a kid from the Midwest where, in the 1960s, antibiotics were given out like Flintstones vitamins for just about everything. When I was 9 years old, I suddenly started getting bloody noses, a lot of them, And for no good reason. I wasn't getting in fights or jamming things up my nose. Not then I wasn't. My mom loves telling the story about when I was very young, but old enough to know better, where one dinner I was not excused because I had not finished my dinner. I had eaten everything but left a huge pile of corn on my plate. Everybody else was gone. Mom was putting the dishes away. My sister had already snagged the best spot in front of the TV. Mom says she looked in and suddenly my plate was clean. She looked on the floor and in my napkin. No corn. I was excused and quickly shoved my sister aside to watch Bewitched. Unfortunately, the next day, a steady stream of kernels of Iowa sweet corn began falling out of my nose and sinuses. That meant a trip to the doctor. The only plus side of the whole deal was that my folks never made me eat my entire plate of corn again. But the nosebleeds, when I was 9, they were a problem. They would just start and sometimes wouldn't stop. One night, my mom had to drive me downtown in a terrible thunderstorm to the emergency room because my nose would not stop bleeding. My face looked like the Sharon Tate murders. The ER doctor packed enough gauze to create several mummy Halloween costumes up my poor nose and sinus cavity. The bleeding stopped, but I had to breathe through my mouth for a night, and I looked like Quasimodo. The next day, my mom had to find an ear, nose, and throat doctor who would agree to pull out all that gauze. Apparently, they were worried it would start bleeding again and they would be responsible, and nobody would do it. Mom finally found a new ENT in town who ended up being an old fraternity brother of my father's. Dr. Brown started pulling and pulling and pulling gauze out of my nose. It was like one of those magic tricks where they pull 25 connected scarves out of their pocket. I looked up bloody noses in my Louise Hay book, and the probable mental cause was a need for recognition, feeling unnoticed, crying for love. Well, that sure made sense. We had just moved to my 6th town in my 9 short years of life. I didn't have a lot of friends, and my little brother had just been born, and he was now getting all the attention. Okay, that one works. How about when I was getting ready to escape Iowa and move up to the University of Minnesota for college? Right before I took the overnight Greyhound bus up to my freshman orientation, I had slipped at the top of a staircase at Noah's Ark restaurant, the place where all we theater types hung out. I fell down 2 flights of stairs. I wasn't drinking. My legs just gave out and I fell. I don't know why. I was on crutches when I got off the Greyhound bus at 5 a.m. in Minneapolis and was getting picked up by my Uncle Carp, who had driven in from the suburbs. I grabbed my suitcase from the driver and my shoulder popped out of its socket. Oh my God, the most intense pain ever. I panicked and began hitting it, and it went back in, but was very, very sore for weeks afterward. 2 bizarre injuries at a very changing time of my life. Okay, look it up. Falling, leg problems. Probable mental cause. Fear of the future, not wanting to move. Well, that was exactly what was going on. I wanted to move, but was terrified. Shoulder issues. Probable mental cause. Represent changes in direction in life and the ease of these movements. Louise nailed it. Of course, the skeptic part of me thought I was being gullible, like when you're talking to some Venice Beach psychic with a nose ring and a half-smoked joint smoldering in an ashtray. This year, 2020, I looked up influenza, a bad respiratory virus, which of course COVID-19 is its far more evil cousin. Louise Hay says probable mental cause is response to negativity and beliefs. Fear. Interesting. That sure makes sense, too. 30 years ago, we were in another virus that was out of control, only it was being ignored. The climate in the U.S. was similar. Homophobia, hatred, and xenophobia was rampant, maybe not as bad as it is now. Bill and I were early in our relationship, and back then gay marriage wasn't even on anybody's radar as something that could ever happen. So we did what all good gays and lesbians did to affirm our relationship. We bought a house together. A fixer, a 1927 Spanish bungalow from an old couple who had raised 3 kids in it. At our final negotiation with the sellers at their dining room table under the wooden wagon wheel chandelier, the poor wife was more interested in the Wheel of Fortune bonus round than seeing how much her windfall might be. The neighborhood was mostly older people, and they were dying off, and one set of neighbors was the meanest old white trash couple ever. I mean, these folks could have been the villains in any number of Disney animated movies. Blanche had big 60s piled hair and a constant annoyed look on her face like somebody had just passed gas. Her husband, Verl, was a hunched-over bag of bones, deaf as a post, with the meanest expression chiseled into his shriveled apple doll face. They said, "Welcome to the neighborhood," when we first moved in, and that was it. Forever. Soon after, we began getting notices from the city that our 2 dogs were barking excessively in our backyard. Bill and I worked different shifts, so somebody was almost always home, and the dogs were not barking excessively. Finally, we were summoned to court by our unknown accusers. We had to purchase a tape recorder that turned on when a dog barked, and we had to count all the barks and chart them on a graph. Additionally, we had to hire a dog psychiatrist. Yes, to come and assess the situation. Since Bill's name was on the dog's licenses, he went to court. And there sat our own Disney villains, Blanche and Verl. All evidence was presented. The dog psychiatrist concurred that there was no excessive barking, and this was a neighbor issue, probably caused by these 2 neighbors not real happy with a couple of fellas living across the street. The judge agreed and told our Disney villains to exchange phone numbers with us, and if there was a problem, to reach out. They never did, and they were dead 12 years later. I was seeing Dr. Schwartz during all this drama, and his yearly physical was like a therapy session. Sure, he did all the laying of hands and listening to your organ recital, but he always asked, "How are you and Bill doing?" I told him about the neighbors. I said, "We are quiet. We are improving the property, for God's sake, and they just hate us." Dr. Schwartz rolled his eyes. He said, "I'm Jewish, and there are always going to be people who don't like you because of who you are." And like a wise old owl, he said, "Living well is the best revenge." Indeed it is, Dr. Schwartz, and we are trying.
LOL take 2. LOL take 2.